call him a ghost, a phantom that ruled from the shadows of the Jalisco mountains. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, but the world knows him by one name, El Mencho. For years, he was a $15 million shadow that the DEA couldn't touch. But every ghost has a beginning, and every empire has a price. This isn't just a story about drugs. It's about a man who knew the law so well because he used to wear the badge himself. Before he was the king of the CJNG, he was a cop. And on February 22, 2026, the law finally came to collect. By 2010, the Jalisco Nueva Generación Cartel wasn't just a shadow anymore. It was a goddamn nightmare. Mencho turned Guadalajara into a slaughterhouse, starting with a ruthless campaign to wipe out his rivals that left the streets littered with bodies and burned out cars. By 2012, his reach spread like a virus into Michoacán and Veracruz, where resistance meant certain death and local officials were forced to choose between a lead bullet or a silver bribe. The world finally realized who they were dealing with in 2015, when Mencho's gunmen did the unthinkable and shot down a military helicopter with a rocket launcher, declaring open war on the state. The terror peaked in 2017, a year of absolute carnage, where CJNG hitmen stormed crowded markets in Guadalajara, spraying indiscriminate fire into innocent crowds, and used car bombs to turn government checkpoints into craters of twisted metal. It wasn't just crime. It was a military-grade takeover that proved one terrifying truth. Under El Mencho's reign, no one was safe, and the law was nothing more than a ghost story. But Mencho didn't just play the game. He bought the stadium. He transformed the CJNG into a shadow government, providing social services in remote villages where the Mexican state had failed, building schools and hospitals just to buy the silence and loyalty of the people. While he acted like a savior in the mountains, his special forces were practicing tactics that would make a professional army blush. We're talking about homemade tanks with 50 caliber turrets, narco submarines navigating the Pacific, and a drone fleet that could drop explosives with surgical precision. He corrupted the very fabric of the country, from small-town mayors to high-ranking generals, creating a web of intelligence that made him invisible for nearly a decade. He wasn't just a drug lord. He was a CEO of a global conglomerate of terror, managing a supply chain that stretched from the chemical labs in China to the street corners of New York, all while living in a jungle tent like a monk of death. Every empire has its sunset, and for El Mencho, the sun began to set from within. The years of hiding in damp jungles and the constant stress of being the world's most wanted man took their toll. His kidneys began to fail, turning the most powerful man in Mexico into a prisoner of a dialysis machine. The iron fist started to tremble. He could no longer move as fast as the shadows he lived in. He needed specialized medical equipment, hidden clinics, and a circle of trust that was shrinking by the day. The DEA and Mexican Special Forces knew that a sick king is a vulnerable king. They stopped looking for a ghost and started looking for a patient. They knew that sooner or later, his need for survival, or his need for the company of those he loved, would force him to make a move that couldn't be undone. Last time. He died before the wheels touched the ground in Mexico City. No final words, no grand confession, just the cold, heavy silence of a man who set a nation on fire and eventually burned in his own flame. The ghost is gone, but the throne is still warm. And in the world of the cartels, a vacuum is just an invitation for the next monster to rise. The man they called El Mencho is dead, but the war he started continues to bleed through the streets of Mexico. If you want to see who steps into the void he left behind, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon. This is the dark reality of the underworld. Until next time, stay vigilant. In the end, it wasn't a grand betrayal or a massive military invasion that brought him down. It was the silence of the Tapalpa Mountains and the weight of a failing heart. On the morning of February 22, 2026, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes was no longer a god. He was a dying man trapped in a fortress of his own making. Intelligence agents, tracking the movements of the one person he still allowed into his inner circle, his lover, pinpointed a secluded ranch hidden deep in the Jalisco highlands. When the elite Mexican special forces breached the perimeter, the air didn't just fill with smoke. It filled with the realization that the legend was over. A brutal firefight broke out, a storm of lead and fire that lasted for hours, as his loyal guards died to protect a man who could barely breathe. El Mencho was found slumped in the back of a fortified room, clutching his side, his body ravaged by years of disease and the trauma of the assault. As a Black Hawk helicopter lifted his bleeding body into the gray morning sky, the king of Jalisco looked down at his empire won.